So right now, before I get ready to mark the vertical portion of my grid on a sphere, I want to make sure it's good and compressed. And this is kind of how I do it. Now, if I have a sphere that's in kind of bad shape, let's say it has some holes in it, I'll use this rib tool, metal rib tool. Right now, I'm using a curved one, but this one's really good. But with this one, if I have a sphere that's not as round, I can feel that it lacks roundness. And by taking the rib tool, see if I hold the rib tool as closely parallel to the face of the sphere, it doesn't remove anything. All it does is compress. But if I find a high spot, I can go perpendicular with the rib tool and it'll scrape that high spot off, and then I can find the low spot and drop that in. Same concept when you finish concrete. The angle of the cement finishing trowel can remove material or place material. And that's part of what a cement finisher's doing. They can feel the slab, they can feel the low spots, and they lift. However, for the most part, all that part is completed in the initial first part of the pour of the concrete. So now I'm going over the whole sphere just one last time. Now, there's always this residual that's left on the sphere from using those tools. You can see how it leaves just a little bit of stuff because I had it ridged up. So I'm going to go over it again, except I'm going to keep this as parallel as I can to the face of the sphere. That way it doesn't leave as much of a residual of clay. But originally, when I started doing ceramic spheres, I essentially just got an equal amount of clay and pinch pot 2 bowls by hand. And so decline. I just got a call on my iPhone. I was trying to tell Siri to decline the call. Somebody trying to sell me my car warranty. So after I do that and I get it down a little bit, I take my finger and I'm able to smooth out that residual. So I'll do that over the whole thing. And it's crazy. It's like, so the reason I wear the ring on my neck is because I've damaged some of my work that I'm hand building by touching it with my hand, by having a ring on. So I rarely wear my ring while I'm working with clay, because it just, I go and put my hand on it, boom, I got a ding in there. There's something about the skin going against this that it just really just kind of cleans it up nice. It gets the residual clay that's picked up by the rib tools. So now I essentially have all the residual established, cleaned up. Now I'm going to just kind of take a look at it You know, because before I get completely serious about starting to mark the grid, I want to make sure it's really, really extremely round. So I'll put it on a Lazy Susan, and I'll just kind of spin it around. Now, the way I'm doing my spheres now, I essentially do it in kind of a pinch pot slump mold style. Because slump mold, normally you're just dropping it in. I found out that I can't get what I want by doing slip casts. So what I do is I wasn't going to show all this, but what the heck, I'll show it. So I have 4 of these. And they're plaster molds. So I have a bowl for each side. So there's my bowl. And I take a strap and I strap it into place. And I take a ball of clay. And initially, when I take a ball of clay, I figure out the surface area, and I do it just like you figure concrete. And I'm able to establish how many square inches of surface area it is, and then multiply that times the thickness of the clay that I want. And it typically gets me relatively close to what I need. And so then I put the ball in there, and I just start from the center, and I'm pushing and pushing and pushing and rolling it out. I am thinking about doing a new technique where it's like I'm inserting sections of a pie, but then I've got that line everywhere. The bigger the sphere, the more I'm concerned about getting air bubbles. And so far, air bubbles have never been a problem for me. The only problem I've ever had on a sphere is sometimes I'll see some, evidence, if you look really, really close, evidence of where the 2 spheres were put together. But that's kind of gone by the wayside too. But I'm kind of thinking more and more like doing a process of, what's it called? Coil pot. Almost where I just do a coil pot layout in here. But, you're just establishing more and more and more places of connection and cracking. So I just have to think about that. But whatever, I get the sphere in there and I get it established. I use my spacers by pushing to see the thickness of my clay, get it where I want it, real sweet. When it's just dry a little bit, I take the straps off and I just pull these apart. And I can pull my sphere out. Just as simple as can be. So initially I made these with the intention, they weren't in half. I made them with the intention that I was going to try and slip cast. Because everybody's telling me, it'd be so much quicker if you slip cast them. But the problem with slip casting them is number one, where you pour the clay in, you've got a hole. And so the concept of compression doesn't work. And then I've got the concept of the possibility of that area cracking if I do choose to fill it in. And I just don't want any cracking. So there you have it. So I'm pretty happy with how the sphere looks. I have a hard time saying sphere. There's a reason why I call them spheres. Someday I'll tell the story. So I'm pretty happy with it. So right now, I'm going to put a hole in it and release the air, if there's any in there. Okay, there's just a little bit. I'm sure you couldn't hear that. So once I release the air, then I'm going to plug it up again. Okay, now it's time to start marking. Now the type of sphere I'm going to do on this requires I'm going to do a 20-degree layout on the vertical face of this sewer. So, and how I do that is I made up this board. I'll try and get a little closer. I made up this board that relates to different degrees of layout. You look really close right there. You can see I've got the equivalents, and it's all color coded. So a 20-degree layout is a red line. So I take this, I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way. So I take this table. If you notice, of course, there's a center mark. You know, voila. Also, this is a Lazy Susan. So I put it on the table. And the first thing I do is I need a big enough dish to receive the sphere. So I basically have a Lazy Susan on top of a Lazy Susan. Then I take this Lazy Susan so that it can't move. And there's a reason for that. It's so when I do my horizontal mark, I just take this off the table and put it on my other table where I've got other videos that show this, where I do my horizontal marking. So I'm going to lock this in place though for now, because I've got this Lazy Susan here. And all I'm marking is the vertical part of the grid. And I know already from other shears that I want to do a 20-degree angle or a 20-degree layout. Okay, so that's locked into place. Now the next thing I want to do is make sure that I've got this base centered on here as well as I can. My tape is, I don't want the tape to affect me, so I'm going to take a little bit off so that the tape isn't. Okay, so I want to center it on here. I have a quarter of an inch. A little over a quarter, a little over a quarter. Okay, so it's centered. Now I do have canvas right here to receive the sphere that I'm going to go ahead and put some cloth on here. This just happens to be an insert for an electric stove that I put on a set of Lazy Susans. Okay. You know what? This might not work. No, it might. Okay. Now I simply put my sphere. Take one more look. I simply put my sphere on top of that. Now, the base is centered, but I can tell you right now, the base isn't nearly as centered as I'd like it to be. Because the base, number one, it's a hand-built base, so I'm sure there's some imperfections in it. And there's got to be imperfections in the sphere. So I take squares and I literally measure each side. And based on what the sphere is telling me, it needs to go this way. So I'm moving it that way a little bit because the squares, I want them sitting on my hash marks on this equally on both sides. Still not quite there. Okay, I need to go back just a little bit. Okay, that looks good there. Now I flip it around. So I do this on 4 sides. Okay, it says I need to go just a little bit this way. So I'm moving it that way a little bit. Okay, I moved it a little too far, so now I'm going to move it back. Just, there you go. Okay, so that's good. Well, I moved it, so now I need to check it here. It's just like laying out a house. If you move a layout, you got to go and check the original layout. You know, because moving something one way affects the other way. And you just keep on going back and forth until you get it where you want it. So I'm in good shape here now. So now I take my pin tool, which is actually I took a metal rigid wire that's used on job sites for supporting ceiling tiles, the grid on a ceiling tile. I took it and I ground it down, made a point on it because I need a longer pin tool. So now every red mark that I have is 20 degrees. So I can set one square to the side. And now I can just start. Now I have to be careful because I have orange marks on here too. But in the orange, for some reason, I get a little confused. And sometimes an orange is the same as a red line, but I have all the orange ones marked. So now I'm going to go through here and I'm going to mark all of the red lines. Now, one thing that's kind of confusing is that a 20-degree layout doesn't equate to 4 equal sides. So initially what I want to do is I want to do the 4 equal sides so I can establish the center point up here. So this one isn't on a red mark. So I scratch the face of the sphere right there. Now I'm going to put some hash marks in there, which basically tell me that's not one of my 20-degree marks. Then I'm going to come here, do the same thing. Hash marks because it's not a 20-degree line. Same thing here. I'm just trying to eliminate as much risk as I can. Hash marks, that's not a 20-degree line. So none of these are coming up to being 20-degree lines. They're essentially 90 degrees apart. Okay. So now I can take a tool can take one of these flexible rulers and run it over the top to bring my hash mark as best I can. So I can establish a center point for the top. I used to have a system where I used a plumb bob. And I had my table set up exact, which is really, really kind of a crazy. I really got, it was just pretty intense. So it's critical that this tape runs parallel to the line that I drew. Can't just go from one point of the line to the other point of the line. Got to follow the line, the range of the line. Okay, so now I have the center at the top of my sewer. I'd like to remove it and show it to you, or I'd like to bring the camera over, but my shaky hands and moving the camera and then setting it back up would just be a nightmare. So I've established a center point up here. So when I do the 20-degree marks, I'll have a eyeball reference of where my marks are. So now, just because I like to do this, I like poking a hole in this. And that's like a major, major control point. And I want to do it with a bigger pin tool. And that was a kind of a fine pin tool. So that's my sweet spot. And none of these other marks come on. None of these other marks, the marks that I did to establish this, aren't part of my 20-degree layout. So I want them to go away. So I'm just going to take a rib tool and make them go away. But I still have my center point because everything goes through the center. That residual clay off. Okay, now I'll try and talk louder. My air conditioner's kicking on. We've had a crazy amount of rain here. I live in Arizona, the Phoenix metro area, more specifically Mesa. And we've just, it's kind of crazy how much rain we've had. I think we've got more rain this year than we've had in the last 2 years put together. So it's our monsoon season. So, I mean, we need the rain, but a lot of the communities have been flooded. So now I'll put the 20-degree mark on. So when I put this 20-degree mark, I'm eyeballing. Number one, I'm trying to hold this square to this line. So I'm holding this square right here to the line that's here. Because angling it will change how I perceive things. So now I'm just kind of aiming for my center mark. So I just take this tool if you see, I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah, I've got a hash mark there. So keep in mind, I post these videos on my YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel, truthfully, is it's pretty lame. I mean, every time I do a video, I learn something new. It's one of those things that I want to create with clay more than I want to make YouTube videos. And going down the rabbit hole of YouTube and trying to figure it out all at once before I do it, it's just, I'm just going to learn it as I go. I also tend to talk way too much. So I'm eyeballing that center point there. See, this is what's nice about having on a Lazy Susan. I could be sitting in a chair doing this, which normally I am. I'm sitting at my workbench, but for this video, for the purposes of this video, I'm choosing to do otherwise. I will confess, though, that sitting in my chair kind of puts me at a height where I can see that line a little bit better. So I'm going to quit moving it, and I'm just going to come around. Right here it says yellow, red, black, and orange. So that's where different degrees kind of line up with each other. There's a whole lot of feel to this. It's not just simply, I kind of have to, because I don't have a reference point down here, so I'm just kind of trying to follow the line that I establish when I'm bringing the line, when I'm scratching downward. So that it has a similar feel. Okay, one more. The reason I bring up the YouTube video is because I'll post this on YouTube where you can maybe see it a little bit bigger. Granted, I typically, everything I do, all of my exposure is via YouTube or Instagram. So essentially I'll have 18 sections. So about 20 degrees would be 36 if I had 10 degrees. And this is a 10-inch diameter sphere. Okay, here we go. So I essentially have a 20-degree layout on this sphere all the way around. It has it carried through the top. So being I have a 20-degree layout on this, I no longer need the lazy Susan below. But I don't want to remove it from its position here. The next thing I do is I take this flexible, and I connect everything through, range everything through. So 20 degrees will range across each other, just not conform to the 90 degrees. If you're wondering, if it did that, why didn't I just do the hash marks? What's funny is I'll find out that some of my marks aren't as consistent as I'd like them to be. And that's where you got to use this tape and the concept of a range line. Range it to an existing line. So just so you know, I cannot remove this piece from this lazy Susan because it'll mess up my next layout protocols. See, and I should have. So I could take this tape off though. See, the tape just holds the lazy Susan so it's not spinning. And you can't always run one line into the other because a degree layout doesn't always run into each other on the other side. So one thing I have to be is I have to be flexible and allow things. I'm finding out that my center mark isn't quite exactly as center as I would have liked it to be, but it's close, so it gives me a reference. So what I know I'm going to end up doing is establishing a little bit kind of a newer center mark. Okay. So like I said, I'm at a stage where I can't remove it from this, but I'll just kind of give you an idea of what happens. On my other table, I have a lazy Susan. I have a bolt, and I bolt this square right here to the table. And I can adjust this right here, the height of this square. I can adjust it up and down. And so imagine this is bolted to the table and I don't have to worry about it. Now bear in mind, there's a whole lot of math that has to happen first, and I haven't done the math. And basically what I do is with each sphere is I measure the circumference, and then I establish a vertical layout. Sometimes it'll be 5/8 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch if I do it. So basically, then I'll measure down from my center hole down, establishing halfway. So there's a lot of math. I basically divide it into four, the sphere, the circumference by 4. Well, it's a deep hole. And then I take this pin tool, like I have right here. I've got my pin tool, and I rest it on this. And I adjust this up and down based on where my hash marks are going to be on the sphere. And then I'm able to spin this and scratch it equally all the way around. I do have a video on my YouTube channel. I think there's a video on my Instagram page that shows me doing the horizontal grid. So right now I've established the vertical part of the grid. Next thing I'm going to do the horizontal part. And the horizontal part does get it's a little bit less, the ability to control it is a little bit more difficult. But regardless of that, through measurements and things like that, I can put everything where it needs to be. So it's really rather time consuming. So being I've come this far, I've got to move over to the next test. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'm trying to get better at doing these videos, so we'll see how it works. Cool. Later.